Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Bodak, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
It was early evening. The sunset was like a crimson scarf over the edge of the harbor, and a low mist hung in the water. The tugboats were returning to the great ocean dock after a long day's work. Hank and Theodore floated up to each other until they were almost bumper to bumper, face to face. Then they whistled and said, "Hello." Well, that's the way tugboats say hello. Then they all gathered around the dock.
Huh, what a very interesting way to say hello. Of course I would love it for someone to just randomly come up to me and go, "Hi!" right in my face. All up in my space. But hey, everyone has their standards. Anyways, it was that time of the day again for the tugs to talk about the day's work. And it seemed like everyone would have oh so wonderful stories to tell. That is until they all saw something very strange coming into the harbor. Gosh, I wonder what it is.
There, appearing out of the mist, was the strangest looking ship the tugs had ever seen. He was all made of wood and had a big flat sail with an odd pattern on it. He had a long, wolfy head with big, beamy eyes and powerful-looking jaws. Who is it?" said Emily. "I've never seen anything like him before," said Bodak. "Do you think he's dangerous?" said George, and he rumbled his engine bravely, but not too loud. "He's coming this way," said Hank. "Someone should go and say hello," said Theodore.
Really? Not one of these tall stacks know what this ship is? Well, I guess that could be accurate if the ship is that old and they've never seen it before. Yet Emily and George are ocean-going tugs, so whatever. But despite this, Theodore decided he should go say hi, like he did with everyone else.
Theodore put on his friendliest face and floated right up to the strange-looking ship until he was almost touching its wolfy snout with his bumper. Then he let out a loud, welcoming whistle and said, "Hello," the way tugboats always said hello. Well, the most surprising thing of all happened after that. The strange-looking ship backed up a little and snorted right at Theodore. Well, Theodore was so startled he turned and hurried back to the dock. Now, that wasn't what he had expected at all.
Okay. Well, that just happened.
Yeah, I'm sure no one was expecting that kind of response at all, which led to everyone feeling a bit on edge for the rest of the night. No one knew of its purpose or where it came from. Funny, I thought the dispatcher was provided that information, no?
You would think, unless this is made to be an unannounced visit. Then again, I'm sure the dispatcher wouldn't appreciate a random ship floating around the harbor. Yeah, I'm a tad confused myself.
Anyway, the next day, Hank found himself coming in contact with that boat later that day, only to get the same reply.
The strange ship silently came up behind him. "What's he doing?" said Theodore in a hushed voice. "It looks," replied Emily, "that he's trying to sneak up behind Hank." Suddenly, Hank saw the strange ship. Hank turned quickly so that he was face to face with the ship. Then he whistled and said, "Hello." Well, the ship backed up and snorted right at Hank, just the way he'd snorted at Theodore when Theodore had tried to say hello. "Yikes," gasped Hank, and he floated away with the barge as fast as he could. He had been so frightened by the strange snorting ship, his engine was pounding. "Come on, Theodore," Emily called softly. "Let's take the long way back to the dock before the strange ship sees us." But Theodore couldn't stop thinking about the strange-looking ship. Why did he try and sneak up behind Hank like that, he wondered? And why is he snorting at everybody?
Gee, Theodore, those are some wonderful questions. Hey, I know what you could do. you could try this little moron thing called asking instead of acting like a bunch of pansy tugboats? I get that this ship is a bit strange, but come on, is it really that hard?
And so because of that second bad encounter, Emily and Theodore decided to avoid the ship entirely, which led into the next day, which caused delays that made the dispatcher's mustache frill.
Tugboats? He said in his most serious voice. Ships have been complaining about how long it's taking to get to their docks. Can someone please tell me what is going on? It's that strange-looking ship, said George. Yes, said Emily. He just floats up and down the harbor all day long. He snorts at tugs, said Fodok. He snuck up behind me, added Hank, and he has big teeth. Well, the dispatcher had to admit that even he had never seen a ship like that before, and he certainly was acting very strangely. Nevertheless, the dispatcher went on, I don't expect him to slow down the work of this harbor. That is all. That ship is very different, said Emily quietly. Once more, the strange-looking ship stayed in the dock beside the tugs. Now, having the ship right next to them made the tugs all very worried, and they didn't tell their usual stories again that night. I have to do something, thought Theodore to himself.
Oh, so you guys are just going to continue to jump the gun? Well, that's just lovely, ain't it? You're really going to let a newcomer like this actually stop you from properly doing your work? Give me a freaking break. But as it turns out, these tugs are so nervous that they don't even know what the hell to do. So what does Theodore do? He goes to ask Rebecca. Because, according to Theodore, Rebecca has the answers to pretty much everything.
He looks like a Viking ship, said Rebecca. A Viking ship? Repeated Theodore. What's that? Well, Viking ships sailed the oceans over 1,000 years ago, replied Rebecca. They were great explorers. This ship in our harbor may be a brand new Viking ship. But, said Theodore, what is he doing here? I really don't know, said Rebecca. Well, I don't think he likes us. If he is a Viking ship, said Rebecca, maybe he just doesn't speak our language. Did you try to say hello to him? Yes, I did, replied Theodore. And then he thought back to the first time he had seen this strange ship and how he had tried to say hello. I wonder, said Theodore to himself.
Ah, looks like the wheels in Theo's head are beginning to turn again. Had these strange encounters not happened prior, I don't think he or the others would have even figured this out. Well, I guess it's time to test this little theory of his. So he heads back to the dock where he meets up with Emily, and the two confront the strange ship once again.
Emily floated up, face to face to the strange ship, whistled, and said, hello. Well, the ship backed up a little and snorted at her. Let's go, Theodore, Emily said to Theodore with a frown. He's just a mean ship. But Theodore turned towards the strange ship. He didn't really look mean, and when Theodore thought about it, the ship looked kind of sad. Theodore, said Emily, what are you doing? I'm going to say hello, said Theodore. And this time Theodore didn't float right up face to face with the strange ship to say hello, like tugs usually did. Instead, he slowly floated up behind the ship, just the way he had seen the ship float up behind Hank. And this time, the ship didn't snort. What it did was even more surprising than that. Hello, said the stranger. My name is Snorri, and I'm a Viking ship. I'm very pleased to meet you. Hello, Snorri, replied Theodore. I'm Theodore. I'm a tugboat, and I'm very pleased to meet you.
Well, golly gee willikers. Who would have guessed? I guess Theodore didn't need to know the Viking language to get through to Snorri. Not to mention that he spoke English too. Which doesn't quite add up to me, because then how come he couldn't tell they were saying hi to begin with? I don't know, I'm seeing a bit of a weak link here.
Why are you being so mean and snorting at everyone? I thought you were being mean to me, replied Snorri. I think, explained Theodore to Emily, it's just that Snorri has a different way of saying hello than we do. See, we tugboats always say hello by floating right up to each other face to face and whistling, said Theodore. I didn't know that, said Snorri, quite surprised. We Viking ships always float up
behind each other to say hello. We think that when you come right up to us face to face like that, you're going to bump us. That's why I snorted at you.
You didn't know I just wanted to say hello? Said Emily. She just had to smile. And all this time, we thought you didn't like us.
I thought you didn't like me,
said Snorri.
I've been floating up and down the harbor trying to talk to someone, but everyone keeps floating away.
Talk about what? Said Theodore.
I'm visiting harbors everywhere to tell stories about what it was like for us Viking ships to explore the ocean 1,000 years ago, explained Snorri. This harbor is my first stop.
And then he looked sad.
But I haven't been able to tell a single story to anyone yet.
Well, that's nice, but perhaps it would have been better to actually make an official announcement or something. Don't just show up uninvited expecting people to know what you're all about. Gosh, look at Theodore. He doesn't even look remotely interested.
For real, Theodore, you could at least have the decency to look a little more interested after you went through all this trouble to communicate with Snorri finally. Is that really too much to ask?
Okay, well, enough of that, because it turns out it was Snorri's first stop on his tour. So I guess he's got to learn as he goes?
Well, now that this was all cleared up and Snorri wanted to share some of his stories, Theodore and Emily very much took it upon themselves to guide the ship with them back to the dock, which definitely took the others by surprise.
Hank began to float bravely forward to say hello, but Theodore went over and whispered, "Go up behind him, Hank. That's how Viking ships say hello." Hank turned and came up behind Snorri, just like Theodore had told him to do. "Hello," he began nervously. My name is Tugboat, and I'm a Hank. Said Hank, my name is Hank, and I'm a tugboat." Well, everybody began to laugh, and their nervousness disappeared as if it had never really been there at all. That night, the tugboats all listened to Snorri, the Viking ship, tell many wonderful stories of faraway places and long ago times. And everyone agreed it was the best storytelling time they could ever remember.
And that concludes Snorri the Viking ship. Alright, Nick, what are your thoughts?
As much as this episode isn't all that groundbreaking and some of the storytelling doesn't make sense at times, I'm fully on board with the message the episode is trying to convey. Snorri is a stranger to a new place, and while the tugboats were trying to be the kind hosts that they were, after a brief misunderstanding, decided to avoid trying to understand the problem, and in turn made their jobs harder and judged Snorri for something he didn't even understand himself. This goes with judging without context. Once you understand where someone comes from, then you can break new ground with them and vice versa. The dots that didn't connect for me, though, is how Snorri spoke English and couldn't understand when the tugboats were saying hi. But whatever. Besides this, though, this episode wasn't that impressive. Both visuals and music were standard, but nothing stood out either. The only real sight was Snorri with his big blue googly eyes. That's all I got.
While I do agree that a bit of the storytelling is confusing in some parts, I too am fully on board with the message of the story. However, I have a different approach. Obviously, assumptions were made on both sides. The tugs were scared because Snorri not only looked different, but he communicated in a much different way than what they do. And Snorri felt threatened in a sense whenever they floated face to face with him. Hence why the tugs tried avoiding him. One might say that this is not only jumping straight to conclusions, but this can also be viewed as a discriminatory thing. Which, if you think about it, this can be pretty relevant in today's society, as there are plenty of children and adults who are judged by how they appear to others. It's only until Theodore shows everyone what happens when we judge too quickly, as we may miss that opportunity to make new friends. And I think that's a pretty important lesson that everyone should take to heart. The music and the visuals really didn't stand out this time round. Our main focus was pretty much all on Snorri, who design-wise looks like a pretty cool ship. I do wish they would have done more with him, but sadly this is his only appearance in the show. I still think it's pretty good for what it is. The message was received loud and clear, and that's why it helped save the episode for me personally. Next up is Tugboat of the Year.